Oh, great. There's no questions. Oh no, stop forgetting. Well, oh, you found them.
Yeah, I found it. A lot. Overloaded.
Overloaded. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my goodness. Here we go. See first question. Oh my goodness. I had a miscarriage about a year ago. However, deep down my heart, I can still not accept it. Even doctors said it was not my fault, but I still question myself. What have I done wrong during that time? Was I too tired, or didn't I eat properly, etc.? It is still sad for me if I see a baby who could be the same age as if my baby was born. Do you have any advice for me how to cope with it? And how should I pray for her or him? Thank you. That's kind of more like a personal question. Depends upon, of course, what age it was, and just exactly what the cause of the miscarriage was, and did you have any other children afterwards? Because if you had a child afterwards, often that can be the child reborn. That happens. Even today, there's a lot of people came over to Bodhinyana Monastery. And one of the couples who came over to Bodhinyana Monastery, when she was pregnant with her first child, everything was going fine, but then just a few days before birth, the baby turned in the womb and obstructed the umbilical cord, which meant there was no blood going in there, and so it was stillborn. I think I mentioned the story before, but it's amazing that family came today. And that I did a funeral service for them. There's a nice little boy called Charlie. And they dressed him up. As a nice little, actually no, it was a baby, more like a young kid. And they did put him in the family photograph with me as well. And what they did, while I wasn't looking, while the funeral director wasn't looking, they got a biro pen and they just put a line on its heel. You don't usually have birthmarks on the heels. But that woman was very healthy. It was just a bit of bad fortune that it was stillborn. And so she soon became pregnant again. And when she became pregnant again, that was when the doctors gave her extra special care. They didn't want her to have to suffer the emotional pain of a miscarriage again. And so that she gave birth to a lovely baby who was male. No, sorry, the one before was male, this one was female, called Annie, and she has a birthmark on her heel, exactly where they did it with the pen. And it was so clear that that was their first baby, was reborn. Didn't quite make it first time. No fault of the baby, no fault of the mother. Just, and I give the simile, which I hope you remember. It's like when you go to the airport, you get bumped off the plane. What do you do when you can't get that flight you booked into? And there's nothing wrong, not your fault, not anybody else's fault. Sometimes these things happen. You get an upgrade on the next flight. This is why he was a boy before and got upgraded to be a girl in this life. That's one way of looking at it. But of course I was fascinated with that story, and when that little girl was growing up, she would come to our city centre. Well, you're going to go, I think, tomorrow, some of you. That's the main hall. This was in the community hall, we call it. And when she was growing up, she was always playing with the other boys. She didn't like girls. She was like a tomboy. But when she got to about 6 or 7, then she just became like an ordinary girl. That's what happens sometimes. So sometimes, if they don't quite make it in this life, and there's a miscarriage, sometimes that baby comes back again. You have another go. How many of you, when you may have wanted to go to this college or university, you couldn't get it the first time, so you went the second time? Or how many of you took a driving test and you failed, you took it again, you passed? Life is like you always have another go. So even that kid trying to come into your life didn't make it the first time, maybe the second time. When you look at life like that, it's not as if that kid, doesn't have another chance. It's either you or nothing. It's we do have other chances. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel good. I've seen so much evidence of that. The other weird thing today, there was another man came. He was Sri Lankan, and his kid, his boy, died, and just cycling to school one morning, and then he suddenly, felt that he should go and check up on his son, and it's almost like something like a father's connection to his son. So he went to go and check on him, and I saw him lying by the side of the road, fallen off his bicycle. And it wasn't that he just fell over, lost his balance, that he had like this kind of heart attack. He had a congenital heart defect, which no one had picked up before. And they took him to the hospital, but they couldn't keep him alive, so he died. And I told the wife, who was really sort of struck more than the husband, said, look, sometimes the kids come back again. And so a small time later, she became pregnant again, and she had a child, a boy again this time, and as soon as it was born, the doctors noticed there was something strange about the boy. He had the same congenital defects and the same symptoms as the boy which had died, only this time it was a baby. So they took him to the kids' hospital in Perth, and they put him just by coincidence into the same bed that his elder brother had died in about a year before, and the same doctor. And even the doctor said, this is weird. But they managed to find out what the problem was and cure it, and so he's grown up, and he's even saw the kid yesterday. So these two families came on the same day, which was kind of weird. So kids come back again, and sometimes actually you can see them, and he recognizes him very easily, and even his mum says, oh yeah, that was definitely my first kid. Next question. Hi Ajahn, is the story of Ajahn Jamnian and Naga a true story? Ajahn Jamnian and the Naga. Which is that story? And the Naga, a true story. Okay, usually I'll say, please, there's so many Naga stories. One of the Naga stories, Ajahn Tate and the Nagas. Ajahn Jamnian. Which one is that? I know Ajahn Jamnian, but the Naga story with him, that I'm not so sure of which story you mean. So anyway, maybe the next year when you come on retreat. But I do know this one story of Nagas, and it's a kind of weird story. You can go on the internet and check this out. It's kind of well known, this one. Over in Ajahn Tate's monastery in Hinmak Peng, I'd already mentioned him to you, that he had cancer when I first went into Thailand as a young monk, and was to ordain as a monk, and looked after by His Majesty the King of Thailand, but no treatment worked, and he decided, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in my home monastery, which was on the Mekong River. So he left Bangkok just on like a one-way ticket, thinking you'll never sort of come back again. And he lasted another 20, 30 years. And he was such a wonderful monk. But the monastery where he lived on the Mekong River, every October, on the full moon day of October, there was what they called Naga fireballs. And no one knew not say no one, he said he knew where this came from. In the middle of the river on the full moon night, these fireballs would come from under the water and just rise up into the air and explode like a fireworks display. The Naga fireball. I never saw it. And the reason was because on that day, the day before the end of the range retreat, you had to be in your home monastery. You go the next day, but not that day. But there was videos of it, the Thai TV cameras went there, many photographs, many other people I saw it. And it only happened one night of the year, on the full moon day, which ended the rainy season retreat. Which was kind of weird. And they checked everything, there was no faking anything, no one could find out any skullduggery going on there. And Ajahn Teta always said that was, there's a community of Nagas under the water. That part of the Mekong River has some very deep caves. And he said they would always come out that time of the year to celebrate the end of the rains retreat, the Pawarana Day. And so if ever you wish to check that out when you get home, don't do it now and waste time, check out the Naga fireballs, Mekong River. Dear Ajahn, would you like to come back to this world in your next life to continue the teaching? You mean you want the same old jokes again? Another lifetime? Oh my goodness. If you had not made up your mind yet, please consider this as an answer from one of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think you're no hope. More recently, we have been advised to put in some more effort in our meditation in order to aim at Sotapanna level in this very life. Oh my goodness, you think that's the way to get any sort of level of wisdom? Is this the right approach? No. Or should we take our own time by taking a few more lifetimes to reach Sotapanna level? No. Stop thinking about time. When is there time and an aim to get somewhere or do something? There's a lot of craving. And then when it doesn't work, there's a lot of disappointment. You think you're doing it wrong. And, or, you just get upset and fail and just try another religion or something. This Buddhism doesn't work. You think, it does work, but you've got to do it right. Read the instructions, listen to the instructions. And if you listen to the instructions and understand the instructions, you realize that to be a stream winner, they actually penetrated the truth of non-self. You understand it. It's on the level of view. But then you're still in the hold of your old views and thoughts and perceptions from the previous lives, but you know that this is the right view. And that's the thing called Sakkaya Ditthi. And if you read what the Buddha said about Sakkaya Ditthi, like from the Anapanasati Sutta, you can never think that any of these 5 components of existence, like body, experience, Vedana, perception, will, or any of the 6 consciousnesses, are yours. If they're not yours, you can't control them. This is what the Buddha said, Anattalakkana Sutta. If the body was mine, I would tell it not to get old. Because it sucks. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's difficult when it gets old. You can't just jump off the seat here. You've got to wait till Freddie comes along to make sure you don't fall over. and you need to sleep more, and sometimes you yawn during the meditation. So sometimes that's just some of the things of old age. You can't control your body, can you? You can influence it, but how many of you can resolve, put some effort in it, never to get old, never to get sick, never to die? In one way, your body is kind of out of control. You can influence it, but you can't stop its basic nature to get old, sick and die. Number two is all your perceptions. You know, sometimes you've got sickness in your body. Can you just will it, okay, sickness, stop. You know what it's like sometimes? You're on a retreat and you know if you got COVID or something, oh come on, it took such a long time to book the air ticket, the time off work, to come to Jhana Grove, and now you're here, and now you get sick. Sickness, can't you wait till I get back to Jakarta or Hong Kong? If I'm sick over there, I can take time off work. But when I'm sick here, oh, that's terrible. The one time I have to do some nice meditation and you make me sick. So sometimes you can't say that to your body. Oh, may you not get sick now, may you get sick sometime else. Or some of the thoughts you have in your mind. Can you tell those thoughts, please don't come now? And stop them coming. And make the mind peaceful. Can you do that? I know this monk who told you a story a few days ago of when he was in a perfect monastery all by himself, a lovely situation, and he couldn't stop thinking about his old girlfriends. So he went to the Buddha and did a deal. Okay, I can think of anything from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, the rest of the day I'll behave. Remember that story? Who was that? And it didn't work. The more effort I put in, the worse my mind got. And then when I followed the deal, okay, 3 to 4 p.m., I can think whatever I want, whatever my mind wants. I'm not going to control it at all. And that hour, from 3 to 4, I'd watched every breath without missing one, almost effortlessly. It was teaching me the way to even become a stream winner is to let go. How can you let go and put effort in at the same time? The right effort is restraint, is giving up. This is right effort. Putting it down, not grasping it, leaving it alone, and it becomes still all by itself. That goes against what you've been taught in your life. If you want to do well at school, you've got to put effort in. If you want to be successful in life, put effort in. If you want to make money so you can retire and relax, put effort in. If I want to retire and relax, I don't put effort in, I don't get any money anyway. Then you can really retire and relax. So this is a different understanding. It's why a lot of people never get even close to being a sotapanna. They put more effort in, they just get more tense. Hi Ajahn. Could you please tell us a story of a farmer, a lawyer, and a king that wished to find a treasure using an arrow? A farmer, a lawyer, a king. I think that's must be Ajahn Jamni and the Naga told that story. I would if I can remember it. That old monk. The what?
Old monks don't lie. Let the arrow fall.
Do you want to tell the story? How does it begin?
There was a poor farmer and he was looking after a monk for the rains retreat. And when the monk was going to go, like they were really sad, but the monk then told him some instructions to blind an arrow. I can't remember exactly.
Oh, okay. There was this monk. I thought I'd get out of this, but it's a good story. There was this monk, and he was just on wandering, and he came to this very poor farmer, and the farmer was devout, spiritual seeker and Buddhist, and it was about the time for the rains retreat. And then, in the rains retreat, the monks have to stay in one place and stop wandering around. So this farmer said, it'd be wonderful if you could stay with me for the rains retreat. I will look after you. And there's it doesn't actually cost that much to look after a monk. All you need is just a simple hut and just food. And I know that there was this gentleman, he was in UK, he came to one of our conferences. Actually, the conference was held over in New Zealand. And when he came to this conference, he had one subject he was going to talk about. He thought it'd make it more interesting by saying just he was an economist. He actually was on the board of the Bank of England. And so he said, well, I'm going to change the whole subject of my talk of how expensive it is, to look after a monk. And then, he was an economist. He did the figures. And then he presented the findings and saying that it's cheaper to look after a monk than to look after a dog. And he said, so every home should have one, a monk. And then you have like pet dogs at home. You love them and they're really nice and they're very cuddly and they're very sweet and they can inspire you, but they cannot teach you meditation or Dhamma. That's the extra with a pet monk or a pet nun. So anyway, having said that, that people knew just one single monk is just very easy to look after. And so they invited him to stay for the rains retreat. They really looked after him. And in return, he would actually teach their kids, some Dhamma, and he would teach the husband and his wife. And even the dog loved him. And after the 3 months rains retreat, it's a time when the monks have to, especially those monks or wandering monks, have to go somewhere else. So he said, at the end of the rains retreat tomorrow, I'm going to be continuing my wandering the day after. And they knew that was going to happen, but they still didn't like it. And they begged him, they started crying. Said, oh, please, please don't leave us. Okay, here's another aside. I'm going to continue the story in a moment. I've said some things about Ajahn, who's still alive. Many of you know him. When he was, on that time when he was wandering here all over the place, he wandered over on the Burmese border, wandered over the border. It didn't really matter in those days, because you were a monk and no one would arrest you if you wandered over the border. And so he wandered in to this, it was a camp of Karen rebels fighting the government. And when he wandered into their camp, I think they were Christian rebels, but they didn't mind, they were really impressed with him. And the reason was they couldn't believe he'd actually got there because they'd surrounded their camp with a huge minefield. And they said, you walk through our minefield without getting blown up? That's impossible. Oh yeah. He's a great monk, Ajahn. And then when he got into the camp. They just invited him to stay for the rains retreat. And he stayed there, and just a lovely monk like that, they got to love him so much that when it got to the end of the rains retreat, he said, "Oh, please don't go." And he said, "I have to go." And so they did arrange, like at this time, a guide through the minefield. After 3 months, they could continue on his journey. And when he got through the minefield, then he saw a couple of the Karen rebels running after him. And they said, "We miss you already. Please come back." And I remembered that story. I told that story, just for Ajahn Ganha, because when he often does that, this Ajahn Ganha, he always asks somebody else to give the talk. So I don't mind, and I got permission to tell that story. That was in South Korea when we went to the demilitarized zone. But anyway, so when this monk said, "Look, I have to leave." "But," said the monk, "you've been so kind to me, and you're so poor. I want to tell you that during my meditation, my meditation is very strong, I found there's a buried treasure nearby. So please listen to the instructions, and you will get this buried treasure, and you'll be able to live, comfortably from now on." And so he listened, even though he was going to miss the monk. Still, he was very interested in the buried treasure, especially a poor farmer. So he said, "What I want you to do is take your bow and arrow, and just before dawn, just stand at the threshold of your house." It's only a small door, you can't mistake that. Stand at the threshold of your house, and when the sun rises above the horizon, pick up the bow and arrow and point the arrow in the direction of the rising sun. And when the ball of the sun separates from the horizon, then let the arrow fly. And where the arrow falls, you will find the treasure, guaranteed. This was a very honest, trustworthy monk. So the man thought, wow, I'm going to miss the monk, but I'm not going to miss being poor. So the following day he was there with his wife, his 2 kids and the dog, all waiting at the threshold of the house at dawn. And as the ball of the sun came up above the horizon, he picked up the bow and arrow, and he pointed the arrow in the direction of the rising sun. And when the disk of the sun separated from the horizon, he shot the arrow in the direction of the rising sun. It went a long way, and they all ran after it, including the dog. And where the arrow landed, they dug a hole. They dug and dug and dug and dug. What do you think they found? Nothing, only trouble. Because that land, it landed in the land of a... Where is it gone? Where's this? Where's it going to go? Sorry? The lawyer. Where is that gone? Anyway, it's up there somewhere. Oh, here is it. Okay. In the land belonging to a lawyer. And the lawyer came up to them and said straight away, "You can't dig other people's land. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take you for everything you've got. That's illegal." And then the man who's dug the earth said, "It's not my fault. It was this monk's fault. This monk said that I'd find a treasure here." And that's like the old monk used to say. And actually it was the lawyer who said, "Look, an old monk said that?" And he said, "Yes." And then the lawyer said, "I'm a Buddhist too, and old monks don't lie." That's the one here. Old monk. Of course it is. I'm an old monk. I don't lie. Old monks don't lie. So the lawyer said, "Look, you're in a lot of trouble but obviously this must be a big treasure around here somewhere. What did the monk say? And he said, oh, that early in the morning you've got to stand at the threshold of the house and let the arrow fly in the direction of the rising sun, and where it falls, that's where you'll find the treasure. And the lawyer said, oh, look, it's obvious your mistake. Look at you, you're all skin and bones. You've got no strength in your arms. Even though I'm a lawyer, I do workouts, I'm very strong. Let me shoot that arrow the following morning. And when we find the treasure, we'll split it up 51%, 49. Because lawyers are like that. Any lawyers here? So the following morning, the lawyer shot the arrow. It went much further, and they all ran after it, including the dog. And where it landed, they dug a big hole, and it was dug, and what did they find? Only more trouble. Because this time, some soldiers were coming past, and they came and said, do you realize, they made the lawyer never dug the hole. It was the farmer dug the hole. And the soldier said, do you realize that land belongs to His Majesty the King? And that is a capital offense. To destroy the king's property, I'm going to arrest you all. And so the soldier said, so they took everybody, including the dog, to the palace. He was implicated. I think there was somebody else I missed out. Oh, the general. Thank you. Old students don't lie. That's you like. So this was the general, was one of those soldiers, and said, look, that's my field. It wasn't the king's field yet. This is my field, that's my property, you can't destroy it. And he said, you're all in big trouble, I'm going to arrest you all. Actually, I think the general said, I'm going to cut off your heads, every one of you, including the dog. Why are you laughing? That's not a Buddhist thing to do, to laugh at a dog having his head cut off. And so that's when the lawyer said, it's not my fault. This farmer told me that a Buddhist monk, an old monk, said we'll find a treasure here. And the farmer said, no, you can't blame me. The lawyer told me to dig. And so eventually the general said, you said that was an old monk? He said, I'm a Buddhist, and old monks don't lie. So what did he tell you to do? And when the farmer told him the instructions he had heard, the general was, oh, it's obvious your mistake. Yeah, you're much stronger than the farmer, he said to the lawyer, but still you're very weak. You don't know how to shoot an arrow. You need to be a professional, highly trained in the army, who knows about archery. Tomorrow, I will shoot that arrow from your house, and I'm sure we'll find the treasure, and we'll split it 33 1/3%, 33 1/3%, 33 1/3%. We split it evenly 3 ways. None of this 49-51. And they all had to agree. There's no other choice. So the following morning, it was the general standing at the house. And when the sun rose, he pointed the arrow in the direction of the rising sun. He let the arrow fly, and where it fell, it went much, much further, and they dug another big hole. And where they dug, and what did they find? Nothing, only more trouble, because it was actually this time it fell into a land in the garden belonging to the king. And the king arrested all of them, including the dog. And all of those people were put in front of the king, and the king looked at the general first of all and said, you're one of my best generals. You should know better than to destroy my land. What was happening? And the general said, the lawyer told me I'd find a big treasure here. And then he asked the king asked the lawyer, said, why did you say that? And the lawyer said, this farmer said we'll find a treasure here. And then the king asked the farmer, why did you say that? And he said, because this old monk told me that if we shoot an arrow from the threshold of my house, let it fly, and then in the direction of the rising sun, then we'll find a big treasure. And that's when the king said, I'm a Buddhist too. And I know old monks don't lie, no. So the king thought and said, I'm going to find this old monk and get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, we're going to put you all in jail, including the dog, but it's very comfortable, and make sure the dog has lots of good food, and we take him out on a walk in the morning to keep good exercise. So the dog didn't mind it at all. He got better food in the palace, even in the jail, than he got at home with the poor farmer. And I think the lawyer managed to arrange bail for himself. I'm just adding to this story. And then eventually they found that monk, and they asked the monk to come to the palace. He had no choice. And so when he came to the palace, the king interviewed them all again and said to the monk in front of all the others, said, you've got these people into big trouble. You said they would find a treasure. They only found nothing but trouble. Why? And the king said, the monk said to the king, Your Majesty, I never told an untruth. There is a great treasure to be found, but they didn't follow the instructions. And the king was intrigued. What did they do wrong? And that's when the monk said, Your Majesty, you come to that poor person's house tomorrow morning, all of you, including the dog. And I will ask you to follow the instructions. And I guarantee you will find a big treasure. And the king was intrigued, because old monks don't lie. And so they all went to the house early in the morning. And just before, when the dawn came, before the sun had risen yet, the king went to the threshold of this poor farmer's house. And he stood on the threshold and waited for the sun to come up. And as the sun came up, he turned around to the monk and said, Is this correct? The monk said, Yes, Your Majesty, correct. And then he picked up the bow and arrow. He said, Is this correct? Yes, Your Majesty. And then he took out the bow and arrow, and he pointed the arrow in the direction of the rising sun. Is this correct, Your Majesty? Sorry, this is correct, Your Venerable. And the monk said, yes. And as the sun rose above the horizon, he was about to shoot the arrow. He pointed in the direction of the rising sun, and the king turned around. Is this correct, Venerable? No. What am I doing wrong? And that's when the monk said, Your Majesty, I never said to shoot the arrow. I said to let the arrow fly. And the king was very smart. So he had the tip of the arrow, the feathers of the arrow in his thumb and finger, pulling the string apart, to get ready to shoot it. And instead of shooting the arrow, he released the tension on the bow, opened his finger and thumb, and let the arrow fly downwards. He let the arrow fly. He never shot it. And where that arrow fell, they dug a small hole and found this huge treasure. Enough when the king took his share, and the general took his share, and the lawyer took his share, and the farmer took his share. There was still very much left, plenty left for the dog. So they all lived happily ever after. Sorry for messing that story up, but that was good enough. But with that story, it's learning just to let go rather than shoot the arrow. Where the arrow falls, that's where you find the treasure. You're including. You think you have to shoot the thing. It's much easier than that. Okay. Well, thank you for letting me remember that story. Ajahn Brahm, I really enjoy and learn a lot after this retreat. How do I continue learning? Any books, online class you have for us? Hopefully I'll be lucky enough to come back here. But if I have online classes and books, you won't need to come back here, would you? Have you got any online books coming up? Sorry? Yeah. Not online books, I mean books or online courses. You know that the word of the Buddha, from which I took some of those, actually all of those talks for the Sutta class, I did get a message from Gerald. It's now proofread, printed, and at least some copies are going to come here soon. You may be back over in... Actually, you don't need to get them from here, because you're going back to Hong Kong. They'll have lots over there for you. And there's another one being done here. That was, remember Ping Pong, the Thai lady over in Sydney. She's almost finished it. One of the monks has proofread it. That's on jhanas. That's also almost ready for printing. They're coming. Do you want one? If you want one, then don't shoot the arrow over there. Just let your desire fall. And where it falls, there you may find a book. Okay. What is this? Okay. Who advised you to put in more effort? Okay, must have been Mara. You know, I mentioned that Mara was the ideal of a demon, control freak in chief. So when we got our first bought our city centre, where you're going tomorrow, you go to Dhammasara first, then to our city centre. What suburb is that city centre in? No. And how do you pronounce that properly? No. No, la, Mara. And for Singaporeans, it means no, la, Mara. It's a great place for a monastery. There are different types of vegetarian and vegan diet. In Chinese Buddhism, people avoid pungent roots like garlic, onion and chives. This is believed to help reduce hindrances. Dear Ajahn Brahm, do you have any advice on how to choose our diet? How to choose your diet, whatever's available. I used to be a vegetarian before I became a monk. And I was told, if you're going to go into be a monk, especially in northeast Thailand, you can't be a vegetarian. You will starve to death. And that was amazing. There was no vegetarian food at all. For example, one day our lunch, actually not lunch, breakfast, only one meal of the day. All we had to eat was a ball of sticky rice about this big, and what went with it was a boiled frog. Yeah, it was boiled, just a whole frog, all the insides in there. I like the way he said, ugh. And not even any salt or no garlic, nothing, just like it just fell into the pot or jumped in there, and then it was put on the top of your boiled rice, and that was it for the day. This was like very poor villagers. They were subsistence farmers. They didn't go to any shops, they didn't have any money. And so that was what we had to eat. And please tell your children this, because I had to, when we started picking at the meat with the rice, it wasn't much, but at least it was something to keep us going for the day. But that was only a small amount of meat on there. You had to start picking at the organs inside. And that was where I valued the fact I'd paid attention, like in science class. I knew one organ of the frog from another organ. I knew which one was which. The monk sitting next to me hadn't paid much attention at all in class. So he pressed something, he didn't know what it was. It was the frog's bladder, which was still full of urine. And he pressed it and that frog peed all over his rice. This is honest. Even though he was hungry, he said, I just couldn't eat after that. So the answer is no. Even the Buddha ate meat. There's very, very strong evidence in the suttas that that's what he did. Why? And he was fully enlightened. My goodness. So that it affects your meditation, your energy levels, your hindrances. I can't accept that. Many people eating meat who have great meditation. I think what's more important is the idea of renunciation. You don't want to eat too much, and you don't eat it just because you think it's delicious. It's like medicine for your health, that's all. Dear Ajahn, my mother holds a grudge for more than 30 years. She's old and sensitive. You've got a dollar sign here. Doesn't want to talk about it. Oh, and doesn't want to talk about it. How can I help her to let it go? How can you help your mother is sometimes that telling her intellectually, if she's getting old, then it's more like telling her emotionally, giving her other stories of people who have learnt how to let go of grudges. And after a while, when she is, how old is she? I've held a grudge for more than 30 years, that means she must be over 30. But anyhow, that sometimes to just encourage, maybe have some stories or some even books about why on earth do people keep holding grudges. It doesn't help the person who hurts you, and it certainly doesn't help you, which means that it's kind of a waste of time. And just to teach more about forgiveness and the beauty of forgiveness, how we can let go. Even some of the stories which I've told you about letting go and forgiveness. And that is incredibly beautiful. And if you can teach her that by example, because what it is, it's learning how to associate with wise people. This was the story of the elephant. Once upon a time, are you sitting comfortably? There was an elephant who was a royal elephant. It was what the king used to use for transport. It was like the Rolls Royce of vehicles to go through the jungle. And it was always a very good elephant, very well behaved, never tripped up, and always knew the right path, and was always just such an easy elephant to ride. But then, over a couple of days, that elephant started to get a little bit cranky, and he would always pass wind when the king was right behind him. king almost passed out. And when he pooed, he'd wait until the keeper was right behind him. And when he got some water in his trunk, he'd squirt anybody, just for fun. He was a very badly behaved elephant. And no one knew why. Was he kind of sick or whatever? And when the royal elephant keepers investigated, they couldn't find any reason. Even the king's own doctor checked him out. He seemed to have no fever and no sicknesses. And so then it was one of the ministers checked out the elephant. And he said, the only way I can find out, I'm going to stay and meditate all night in the elephant stall, or right around the back of the elephant stall, and see what happens. And that's when the minister found out the reason. Because in the middle of the night, the minister heard a sound behind the elephant stall. And he went to check and found out there was a gang of drug dealers would always meet there in the evening, because that was a kind of a safe place for them. And they would discuss all the deals they had made and all the people who hadn't paid their drug debts, and they were going to beat them up and even kill them. And the elephant would hear all of that every evening. And that's where the minister realized what was causing the elephant to misbehave. So he told the king, and the following day they arrested all of those bandits, and they invited the monks and nuns, in turn, to go to the back of the elephant stall and meditate and chant and teach Dhamma. Even though the elephant couldn't understand Dhamma, or whatever the chanting was, nevertheless, just being close to good people, that made the elephant change and become a really good elephant again. It's called like the association with the wise is a great blessing. And after I tell that story, I usually tell our locals, if you've got a husband who's misbehaving, send him to the monastery for a week. He doesn't even have to listen to the Dhamma or listen to the talks. Just that the energy will actually soak into him, and he'll become a much better husband when he goes back home. If it's a wife who's not behaving properly, send him to Dharmasala. And just the good conduct of all those nuns over there will eventually, don't even need to teach them, they'll just soak it up automatically. But then somebody once asked, but if too many husbands get sent to Bodhinyana monastery, will all the monks soak up their bad energy and they become bad monks? That's why we don't have too many people coming at one time. Dear Ajahn, please share your thoughts on the joy in suffering and or being mindful on a sickbed. The joy of suffering, what I remember was when I had scrub typhus. First year I was a monk in Thailand. I got this disease. It's very similar to typhoid. It's called scrub typhus. Little mites in the forest, because in the cold season it was very good to practice, being a monk in the forest by not sleeping in your hut but sleeping on the ground with your mosquito net above you. The trouble was these little mites in the ground, they could easily sort of get through any protection and bite you. But you never knew it was tiny mites. But that's actually carried the scrub typhus infection. And the locals would never get it. They had immunity. They'd lived in that area for years. It was only the Westerners, the visitors, would get the scrub typhus. So when I got that scrub typhus, they really thought it was typhoid. That's what it looked like. So I was put in the hospital. And this was a monk's hospital in northeast Thailand. It was a very poor part of the world. And so when you went into the monk's ward, and they put a drip in your arm and a few antibiotics, I didn't really know what was going on. But what I did, I was mindful enough to see the entrance to the ward. There was a nurse's station, and there's a male nurse there because we were monks, and then at about 6 p.m. the male nurse disappeared. And I was really worried the replacement night nurse hadn't turned up yet. So I knew enough Thai. I talked to the monk in the next bed. Should we let somebody know the night nurse hasn't come? And that's when he told me, night nurse? There is no night nurse. If there's any problem at night time, that's just bad luck, bad karma. That wasn't reassuring. So we only had like a nurse to look after us for 12 hours a day. The rest of the time we had to look after ourselves. And then my treatment. There was this nurse came, a female, to give me an injection twice a day. One in the morning, one in the afternoon. And sometimes people think that all Thai young ladies are just so gorgeous, good looking. Not the one who was my nurse. She was built like a water buffalo. Incredibly strong. And she needed to be, because the needles they used in those days were all like recyclable needles. You know, they would always boil them up before they used them. Boil them to sterilize them. And they'd use that needle so many times because the poor hospital, they had to. I always thought they used them in Bangkok first, and once the Bangkok hospital had used them, they get sent up to the provinces, you know, where this hospital was in Ubon, and after using them in the main wards of the hospital, they send them to the monks' wards last of all, because we were supposed to be the tough guys. They were so blunt. So blunt. They never injected you. Stabbed you. Honest. That's why that nurse needed to be very strong. Twice a day in the morning in the backside. It was like going to the principal's office. And after a couple of days, my backside was so sore. And they didn't know what was wrong with me. So they always gave like different groups of antibiotics, keep on trying them until they thought they could find one which worked. And you can imagine what I felt when Ajahn came to visit me. This big teacher came to visit me. And I thought, what a wonderful treat that was. He had lots and lots of loving kindness, but his bedside manner was hopeless. He looked at me and he said, Brahma Wangsa, you'll either get better or you'll die. The trouble was, that was so true. He said, the suffering won't last. And then he left. You try that like your mum or your grandfather. You go up there and go and visit and say, this is true, I can't sort of lie to you. You'll either get better or you'll die, mum. It's not really appreciated, is it? But then, one day after about 3 or 4 weeks having fever, and I think you'll understand this, but I never understood this before. I didn't have as much understanding of sickness. You get so little energy left. And so it was really hard even to sit up. I was only about 24 at the time. It's the lowest energy I've ever had in my life. And so one day I was just sitting there in a fever. I decided, oh my goodness, what should I do? And no joy in sickness at that time. But what there was kind of a bit of desperation. Nothing's working. I'm in a foreign land. I don't know what's going to happen. My teacher, who I relied upon, just tells me these things I cannot argue with. You will either get better or you'll die. But that wasn't very reassuring. So there's only one thing to do. Meditate. And that kind of blew my mind. It was out of desperation, nothing else. And then he meditated. I don't think I did the breath meditation. It was actually more like the Emperor's Three Questions meditation. Now is the only time I have. And whatever's the most important thing is right in front of you now, and just be kind. That was to the sickness. And he went into a really deep meditation. And that was kind of unbelievable. He was so sick and energy-less. And then when I came out of that meditation, just the contrast between weak and sick and being in this beautiful high energy bliss state was so great. And when I came out, such a relief. And then I looked at my posture. That kind of got my attention. I'd always been taught you'd have to sit cross-legged with a straight back, the right arm over the right hand over the left hand, thumb slightly touching, back straight, eyes closed, and head slightly down. That's what I was taught. But this posture, one leg was that way, another leg was that way, the arm this way, and arm that way. I've never ever seen in a meditation book that posture ever before. But it worked. And that's one of the reasons why I tell each one of you, the best posture for you, ask your body. Body, how do you feel? Do you want me to remove that leg for you? Or how do you want to meditate? And any posture, you can get the deepest of meditations. It doesn't have to be like this or like that. And that was actually the joy of that sickness. I learned something from it. Some amazing stuff from it. And even like sometimes people say, when I'm better, when I'm over the COVID, then I start meditating. No. You have COVID, meditate now. Your mind is so incredibly powerful. Dear Ajahn, does the breath cease before nimitta, after nimitta, or after jhana? It ceases at a certain level of jhana. Beforehand, you'll cease being aware of it, but it still keeps going in and going out. This is an Ajahn Chah story. When Ajahn Chah had his stroke and he couldn't really communicate with anybody, the monks of Wat Pah Pong, they had a meeting and said, what should we do now? And so they decided, I'll just let nature take its course. Ajahn Chah has done so much teaching, so much service, just let his body fade away. Let him die. And His Majesty the King of Thailand heard about it and said, no, you have to keep him alive. And when the King of Thailand says that, you have to follow it. Even the monks have to. So the King of Thailand arranged a trained medic to be with Ajahn Chah 24 hours a day, 8-hour shifts, and 2 monks would be just attendants. And so one evening, Ajahn Chah stopped breathing. And the medic on duty that evening freaked out. Ajahn Chah's died. He said, well, he's going to die one day. But the medic said, yes, but not on my shift. He could understand what he was feeling like, especially as this was all being paid for by the King of Thailand. So the monks had to argue with him, look, he's only in a deep meditation. He said he does this quite often. He doesn't breathe for hours. But he's perfectly healthy. And that was when the only agreement they could agree on was that the nurse, the male nurse, the medic, would take blood samples every couple of minutes just to make sure the blood was well oxygenated. As long as there was oxygen in the blood, then there would be no damage to any vital organs in his body. And this was a kind of a really interesting experiment which I wish that they had videoed or something to prove what happens when you're not breathing in deep meditation. And they found out that blood, the oxygen level in Ajahn Chah's blood was constant all the time. It never decreased, even though that his heart was beating. Blood was going around, but there was no breath happening. So the medic was very happy just to leave him like that. And then eventually he started breathing again when he came out of his meditation. Where the breath stops, it's usually in the fourth jhana. That's what the Buddha says. But you don't need breath then. You're so peaceful and still. Do you think that's true? If you doubt it, give it a try tonight. So, who is the most important person when you meditate in your cave, in the meditation hall? What technique of meditation that you do when your mind is not in the present moment? So when can learn from what you practice? So, okay, I suppose we can learn from what you practice. The most important person, again, we don't call it a person, you depersonalize it. What are you aware of right at this moment? And that becomes the most important thing in the world. People think they should be watching their breath, or they should be watching peace, or they should be watching something which is noble. Even if you're watching pain, or sickness, or you have a grudge against somebody, now watch that grudge, it's right in front of you, it's dominating your perception. So invite it in. But watch it with care. And that's where you're going to understand, where you get to understand these things. Once you get to understand, what are things you try and get rid of. That's the old Chinese art of war simile. Know your enemy, know yourself. 1,000 battles fought, 1,000 battles won. Know your enemies, not just your friends. And when you notice the difficulties in meditation, the tiredness, the sleepiness, the restlessness, know it by giving it importance and putting it right in front of you, not trying to get rid of it, but getting to know it. And once you get to know it, you soon sort of see through it and it can disappear so quickly. So what do I do when I'm in my cave? I meditate. That's the most important person. There's always somebody in my cave when I'm in there. Of course, that's me. It's nice just being by yourself so you can feel your body. If I have an itch in my ear, that becomes really important. And I know what to do with it. Okay. How are you going? Are you too tired yet? No? Okay, I'm surviving, just. When I meditate, I realize that I have two minds. Oh my goodness. A quiet, peace and free and noisy. Sorry, I can't control my sleepiness. Quiet, peace, free, noisy, past, future and present. Questions. Can we have the quiet, peace and free all the time? Or no, quiet, peace, free mind all the time. Of course you can. That's being in line, that's what the Buddha had. Or only if we stay doing meditation we can get that mind. That's how you strengthen it and stabilize it. But eventually you can get quiet, peace and free all the time. Is that how the Buddha lived? Quiet, peace and free. He had a lot of humor as well. That became automatic. Oh my goodness. Another story you want. Can you please tell us a story of the monk and the weatherman? This is how monks understand the stock market. Once upon a time, in a monastery in the foothills of the Himalaya mountains, the abbot passed away. And when the abbot passed away, the monks met and they elected a replacement abbot. And then when it got to the late autumn, coming close to winter, always the abbot would be asked, is it going to be a cold winter, a moderate winter, or a warm winter? Because they had to collect wood to keep the monastery warm. Have you already heard this one before? That's why you're groaning. It's a good one, though. So, and it's not just a funny story, there's a real deep meaning behind this. And so that once the winter started coming, all the other monks asked the head monk, only newly elected, is it going to be a cold winter or a moderate winter this coming year? And it's essential for us to know how much wood to collect. And the monk said, leave it with me tonight. I will follow the tradition just like my predecessor. I'll meditate and I'll let you know in the morning. The problem was the new monk, the new abbot, was not as good a meditator as the previous one. So he was meditating, and didn't get any answer. So out of desperation, he picked up his mobile phone and rang the meteorological office. And he didn't tell his name, he did it incognito. And he managed to get through to the professor of meteorology in the office in New Delhi. He said, can you please let me know, just roughly, what's the forecast going to be for the winter in this part of the Himalaya mountains? And the professor of meteorology said, well, it's going to be kind of average, not too cold, just ordinary. Thank you. And the abbot hung up. And then the following morning, the abbot said, I found out, through my power of being able to use a mobile phone, that this year it's going to be like average, but we still need to collect some wood. So thank you. So for the next week, all the monks collected wood, and they did much more than expected. They collected a huge amount of wood. And after 1 week of hard work, they asked the abbot again, is it going to be a cold winter? Have we got enough wood yet? He said, leave it with me tonight. I will let you know in the morning. And this night, he didn't even try to meditate. He got on his mobile phone straight away. Got through to the professor, and incognito, he asked the professor, is it going to be a cold winter or an average winter? And the professor said, actually, the signs are worse than last week. The signs are it's going to be actually quite cold. Thank you. And the following morning he said, by the power of my amazing sort of skills, I have found out that it's actually going to be a bit more cold than I thought. So we better go and collect some more wood. So the monks worked really hard collecting more wood the next week. And then when they'd collected so much and every part of the monastery was stuffed with wood in this cupboard, that cupboard, and then they asked, is it enough yet? And he said, leave it with me, I'll tell you tomorrow morning. And that night he rang the meteorological office again. The meteorological office said, actually, it's much worse than the week before. The signs have really deteriorated. It looks like it's going to be a very, very cold winter. And so he told the monks the following morning, we better collect some more wood. And this time the monks were working so hard, and they were just kind of complaining. We never collected as much wood as this before. We're storing it everywhere. And eventually they asked, is this enough yet? And the head monk said, leave it with me. And so again, he rang the meteorological office incognito. And the professor at the meteorological office replied again, this is one of the worst winters we've ever seen. All the signs are pointing to extreme cold. Thank you, thank you. But then the abbot couldn't help but ask, how do you know? Are you sure of the signs? And the professor said, yes. We know because those monks in that holy monastery up in the mountains are collecting wood like it's going to be no warmth at all left. That's how we know. So that's where the weather forecasts come from. That's how the stock market works. When people think, oh, this particular stock is going to go up, then it goes up. When they think it's going to go down, it goes down. No real reason, just people's belief. I don't know how many people have asked me in the last couple of weeks. They say, look, I think it was one of the questions here, it's a good time to have children because there's climate change, there's wars. How's the war in Ukraine and Russia going to go? How's the war in Gaza and Israel going to go? When people start saying it's going to get worse, it's going to get worse, then it does get worse. When you start saying it's going to get better, it does get better. Try it. My indecisiveness exhausts me. I have trouble making a decision, and then once I have, I continue to go mentally back and forth between options. I weigh positions and consider what ifs, possible regrets. How can I make decisions more easily, with less mental strife, and then feel secure in my good, bad, who knows choice? Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. One decision I'm glad I made was to join your retreat. I'm grateful to be here. So somebody asked me this question, I remember in Norway University. And I said, well, let's make it a bit more clear. Let's suppose that your decision is, should I marry the boy I'm sitting next to? She went red in the face. I shouldn't have done that. That's what she was trying to decide. And I told her, if you're trying to make a decision which might affect your whole life, the best way of making that decision is take up a coin and flip it. Heads, I marry him, tails, I don't. It's obvious, it solves the problem, doesn't it? You have a decision. It's much deeper than that. So what you do, heads, I marry him, tails, I don't. It comes up tails. What's your reaction? If it comes up tails, and inside you silently say, yes, I don't have to marry him. That reveals just what you really want to do. Follow that. And if you say, it comes up heads, yes, I marry him, and then you think, let's try 2 out of 3. All that tossing the coin is doing is revealing what you really want to do. And once you've made that decision, in life you make a decision, and it's like going outside of this hall. You turn left or you turn right. Does it really matter? Because all these paths, they go round and round and round. You get to where you need to go anyway. So, if ever I have a decision to make, should I turn left or should I turn right? I made that decision, I never look back. Instead I say, I preserve most of my energy to making that decision work. I don't waste that energy and thinking, should I go this way, should I go that way, should I go this way, that way, should I go a little bit that way, then turn around and come back again, go another way. That way, you've got no energy to make the decision work. So where should I build the next monastery? Got a coin? Now, should I make my next trip to teach a retreat overseas, to do a retreat in Hong Kong or in Jakarta? Which one should I do? It doesn't really matter. You just make a decision, you make it work. That's why, I thought the next monastery I should build is not actually in a place, in a boat. If I get a nice boat with maybe 60 compartments and a nice meditation hall, and then I can sail it to Hong Kong for 9 days, 10 days, and then I can sail it to Jakarta. Jakarta, yes, it's got a port. Sail it to Jakarta, even just off the coast of Sumatra, so all the people from Medan can come on the retreat. And then, over to UK, and then over to Sydney to do a retreat for Higher Karunika. And you won't need a new retreat centre everywhere, staying empty most of the year. Have a nice boat, and then I can go everywhere to serve our community. Would that be a good idea? And I can always have, like anyone who misbehaves on the retreat, breaks their precepts, always have that, they walk the plank. Okay, I should stop fantasizing, even though I'm a bit tired. If a person can go to the fourth jhana, his body, etc., is disappeared. Does it mean that this person is free from sickness and will have a long life? Not necessary. It's not just the jhanas. When you're in the jhana, you're safe. But it doesn't mean a long life. Who was one of those people who certainly had jhanas and psychic powers who didn't live a long life? That's right. That's a long life. It's long enough. I was talking about Devadatta. So even though he had the jhanas, he still had a blockage in his wisdom. He couldn't maintain them. He lost them after a while. That's another interesting thing. That these deep meditations, you can access them. If you don't react to them properly, if you think they're yours, you own them, and you become proud of them, then you tend to lose them. You can't attain them anymore until you learn how just to be a bit more selfless. Dear Ajahn, in all the forgiveness stories told by you, there is a reconciliation between the two sides. What if the other person denied any wrongdoing or even forgot about the crime? Well, at least you forgive them. The power of you forgiving is sometimes enough. The other person doesn't need to. If you've forgiven them, you don't actually live close to them anymore, or they just cannot really communicate with you for one reason or another, then it's still very powerful. Okay, this was the note. I would like to connect with a person who spent time in the wilderness and found her totem animal. Contact details are on the paper. That's Freddie. He wants to contact the black, big black cat. Is that right? Are you sure that you can handle a big black cat? Why do you want to contact my totem? Snake. Dear Ajahn, is forgiveness and repentance the same or different? Forgiveness is, just much more clean. Repentance is sometimes you think you need to do a like a purge of something, a penance, and do some painful ceremony so as to wipe off the past bad karma. Can bad karma be overcome? You've done something really bad. Do you have to pay for that? Can it be overcome? You must have heard this from a good monk before, that the Buddha said it's like putting a spoon of salt in your cup of water. If I put a whole tablespoon of salt in this water, it becomes undrinkable. But if I put the same tablespoon of salt, of port, tablespoon of salt into a whole big bowl of water, then, a big tank of water, and stir it up, you can't even taste any saltiness in it. It's diluted so much. And that's a nice simile of the Buddha. You can dilute any bad karma from the past. So much so you can hardly feel it. So if you've done some terrible, awful things, really bad things, then you can always dilute it by doing lots and lots and lots and lots of good things. So there is something you can do. Go diluting your bad karma. How are you? I know I'm tired and that sometimes my answers may not be as powerful as usual, but are you happy with them so far? Okay. Dear Ajahn, may I have your comments on Buddhist traditions that do not stress the importance of jhanas? Are they still conducive to liberation? Thanks. No. You need the Eightfold Path to get liberation. And what is the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path? Samma Samadhi. And what is Samma Samadhi? Jhanas. Always explained in that way. In the Gopika Moggallana Sutta. This was just after the Buddha passed away. Ananda was the go-to person, and so people asked him, what type of meditation did the Buddha teach? And Ananda replied, the Buddha only taught 4 types of meditation. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. They have jhanas all over the place in the suttas. Can devas do anapanasati breathing and get into jhana if they don't have lungs? Yes. If heavenly beings, devas, did get into those deep meditations, they would leave their deva realm and they go into what they call the arupa, not the arupa realms, into basically the jhana realms. It's actually the Brahma loka. Because remember, when you haven't got a body, it's a mind-made body for those heavenly beings, then because if the mind just goes into a pure state of jhana, then they just get reborn in a different realm immediately. The story of Ananda who got enlightened when he took a nap and let go of everything. So when come one want to get enlightened, they have to let go of the wanting. Yes, to get something. No, if it's not to get something, then it's another type of wanting. And enlightenment will come and then come to them by itself. The lovely story of the donkey and the carrot, or the donkey and the durian, that's actually how to understand how enlightenment happens. What Ajahn said, sitting under the mango tree, perfectly still, just having a tiny bit of compassion and opening your hand. That's how these things work. So what's the purpose of we learn the teaching and not the realization we have to let go of everything. Let go of everything. Is that what you have to do? Then it becomes another type of doing. You're actually doing something. You're letting go. So, the path is actually to, again, imagine you're the passenger, just not the pilot. This was one of the articles I read in one of the magazines on Air Asia many years ago. When I was traveling from a place to some other place, and I picked up the magazine and read it, and it was one of their pilots was writing about what he imagines to be the aircraft of the future. In the aircraft of the future, he said, there'll only be two beings in the cockpit. One will be the pilot, and the other one will be the pilot's dog. And the whole purpose of the pilot, the only purpose of the pilot, will be to feed the dog. And the only purpose for the dog in that cockpit of an aircraft will be to bite the pilot if he touches anything. In other words, it'll be totally automatic, which is apparently much safer than when a human being gets in control of things. And so that's why the dog's job is to bite the pilot if he touches anything, and the pilot's job is just to feed the dog. So it'd be much safer, automatic. I like that simile, because if I could do that somehow, to put a dog in your brain when you're meditating, and if you do anything, even if you try to let go, so that way you can't do anything. Then you get into deep meditation so much more quickly. I'm getting close. I would like to have I've done that one already, a biological child. Hey, it was yesterday. Maybe I haven't got that many to go. In Sutta class, you mentioned about the 4 focuses of mindfulness with emphasis of having, I haven't answered this one yet, with emphasis on having restrained the 5 hindrances. The ability to abide, aware of the body, experience, the mind, and mind objects. Please explain the distinction and or correlation between restraining the 5 hindrances and growing in virtue. When you grow in virtue, to do that you have to restrain things, and you weaken, what the force is, the impulse to break precepts. Why would anybody want to break a precept? Growing in the 5 hindrances, restraining the 5 hindrances and growing in virtues. Why can't one grow in virtue? To me, it doesn't make any sense to practice unvirtuous behavior. Why do that? It only hurts you or hurts somebody else. That's one of the reasons why, when to some people I say that maybe it's Wesak Day, we should keep the precepts today, some people say there's too many to keep. So I ask them, just keep 2 precepts. Each one of you, just keep 2 precepts. What are those 2 precepts? Never do anything which harms or hurts another being. Not just human being, any living being. Don't harm or hurt anybody. And the second precept is never do anything which harms or hurts yourself. And they become the 2 precepts. And from them all the other precepts come. I remember once giving a talk to school kids, and they wanted me to, can you tell us about, your precepts and how you live? Why do you do that? And then I told them, the only precepts even monks and nuns keep are the 2 precepts. Never doing anything which hurts or harms another being, never doing anything which harms or hurts yourself. I asked, give me some examples of that. What harms or hurts somebody else? lying, stealing, cheating? What harms or hurts yourself? When I just, again, cheat or hide and don't do my homework and don't sort of respect my mum and dad or whatever, these kids got all those precepts, the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, so quickly. Because they don't want to harm or hurt anybody. Not themselves either. So that's actually how the virtue, when those 3 factors of virtue, some are right speech, right action, right livelihood, when they're practiced, they assist restraining the hindrances. And also, the next thing one does in the Eightfold Path is actually the energy, the right, sometimes they call it right effort. It's not, if you actually look at it, it's learning how to restrain things. If you see something like in the shops, you'd really want to buy, but you realize you can't afford it, then instead what you do is actually look at all of the negative qualities of purchasing or owning that thing. And if you look at the negative qualities in something, it takes away just the wanting for it. Again, that's what I was taught as a monk by Ajahn to do. If you see a beautiful, I was a heterosexual, if you see a beautiful woman come into the monastery, what should you do, Ajahn Brahm? Just look for something in her which is a little bit repellent. I remember this one Thai lady who came in and she had smelly armpits. I mean, being a bit gross, but that was actually, otherwise she was quite beautiful, so that actually turned you away from her. You didn't want to get caught up in just seeing the beautiful side of her. And that's what happens if you actually get enamored by somebody. You tend to just see that part of her which is beautiful, and you ignore the other part of her. The other thing which I used to do when I came here, if I saw any beautiful woman, I deliberately trained myself to look at her pimples. They always had a pimple somewhere. I'm not doing this because I was misogynist. I was just like protecting myself so you wouldn't get into any lustful fantasies. And also, if you'd have seen me when I was a young monk, my front tooth, when I was a kid, I fell over and I broke the tooth, and so it got discoloured. And I couldn't afford to go to the dentist to get it fixed up. And when I became a monk, many people offered, I can take you to a dentist and pay for it to get a cap on it. And I said, no, I prefer that it's discoloured in the front. And that was I called it the first line of defence as a monk. You weren't sort of good looking enough. And that's the second line of defence. Later on, when I got this thing fixed up, then I needed something else to make myself non-attractive. So what did I do? Becoming fat is just trying to make myself look not so handsome as I did a long time ago. Now you know the reason for this and why I won't get thin until I'm really ugly. Do you believe that? No. Old monks don't lie. Okay, 2 more questions and then I can go to bed. Oh, what's this one up here? Oh yeah, that's Freddie. Please talk about how a deep insight leads to the end of rebirth and why it is irreversible. Thank you. Why the deep insights lead to rebirth. You know how to be still. And at the end of life, do you really want to be reborn again? I remember one of these cases. There have been a few cases, we shouldn't really talk too much about them now because they're very long, about kids being born who could speak. There's no exaggeration. The first time this happened, I became aware of it, these 2 Australians, they had just had their second kid, both were boys, And the new kid had just come back from hospital with the mother and was in the front room, and they told their elder son, please say good night to your baby brother, Paul. And so, dutifully, their elder brother, Peter, went over to the little pram, bent over and said, good night, Paul. And then Paul replied, good night, Peter. He was only a couple of weeks old. And if that happened to you, it freaked the parents out. And so they didn't know what to do, but they were just stunned and paying full attention. And the elder son, again, Peter, bent over again and said, good night, Paul, repeated it, not being asked. And Paul, the baby, said, good night, Peter. And this time they were both paying full attention. And they were so scared and confused. That's why they came to see us, the monks. And they said, well, we're not Buddhists, but we thought, you may be able to understand, or at least tell us something. They said, yeah, and it's because, that even though he was a baby, babies can still have a strong mind. And that mind does the talking, where the brain is not capable of doing the talking yet. And one thing they said, which was fascinating, they said their baby spoke in an adult voice, not in a baby voice, but it spoke. And the reason I said that story, because my favorite story, it wasn't actually told to us, but read it in the magazine. There was in a maternity ward in the US, when the baby came out of the womb, still attached to the umbilical cord, it spoke. And its words were, oh no, not again. Honestly, imagine it. You think you're finished with school? No. You've got to carry on wearing nappies for another couple of years? Yes. Imagine you don't know, you need something, you try and tell your mum and dad and you can't get the words out because you haven't learned language yet. It's very frustrating being a young kid. And you think you're finished with homework and exams and going to school? No. That's why if that happened to you and you got reborn, oh God, not again. Anyway, deep end of insight leads to the end of rebirth and why it is irreversible. Because once you've got rid of that lust for birth or the desire for birth, you don't want it anymore. You just get a sense of not interested anymore. Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't actually do the last question on this, but I did the first part of this question about the sutta class. Thank you for letting me just go on quite fast and not in depth, and I'm sure that if I had more energy I could answer those questions in more depth, but I have had a busy day and I do feel tired, so please forgive me. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Excellent. I haven't gone into bed yet, I'm going. But thank you. It's 9:46.